So we're here for our webinar today, Bridging the Economic Potential of Arts, Cultural, and Outdoor Recreation Assets. So very excited to have everyone here today to talk about this exciting topic. For those of you that don't know me, don't know us, I'm Nicole Muse-Kilcucky. I'm a director here at Fourth Economy. We are an economic and community development consulting firm. We work all across the country to help communities and organizations create strategic, equitable, and resilient economies. Some of the things that we do a lot of and sort of constitute our bread and butter from a services perspective, we do a lot of strategic planning and really focus on economic vision and action planning. And today we're going to touch on some of that strategic visioning and action planning that we've done specific to the outdoor and cultural economy and strategy. So we've done quite a bit of work in these areas. We love working with our clients on arts and culture and outdoor rec economy work. We've done quite a bit of that in different parts of the country, and you'll hear from some of our clients and our communities that we've worked with in the past on our webinar today. In addition to arts and culture and outdoor economy work, we do a lot of feasibility and impact analysis, doing fun things like looking at the economic impact of the Newport Folk Festival, for example, or looking at the impact of outdoor recreation assets on local economies in different communities. We also do a lot of resiliency planning, looking at the impacts of climate change and preparing for the future, looking at things like workforce and affordable housing strategies, industry and market trend forecasting. And then on the equity side, helping communities plan for things like economic mobility. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today, and we'll moderate a great panel. So I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Carol Ann Willett, who will talk a little bit about her work in Maine. Carol Ann?
Thank you so much, Nicole, and welcome everyone. Really exciting to see all the names and the organizations in the chat. My apologies, I'm battling a cold, so my voice is not as it should be. So very quickly, yes, I have been the director of the Office of Outdoor Recreation. I was actually brought into state government to create that office and led the build out over the last 6 years. Prior to that, in state government, I had been the director of tourism. So this past summer, the state actually transferred me back to the Office of Tourism, but with the guidance of leading the work and connecting the work between tourism, outdoor recreation, and the Office of Film. So I just give a little bit of background about the Office of Tourism's Destination Management Plan, which the process was started prior to me returning to the Office of Tourism. At the Office of Outdoor Recreation, we were part of the process. And this plan really was designed to move from the notion of just marketing as a destination and really looking more collectively at the management side of it, really with a focus on balancing the visitor economy with the stewardship of our natural resources, culture, and qualities that have always drawn people to Maine. So thinking very holistically at, residents' quality of life and the visitor experience. You'll see here our vision for Maine. And I will say that the destination management plan is focused on 5 strategic imperatives. So we look to optimize long-term impact, promote destination stewardship, advance development of destinations, and prioritize collaboration and partnership while enhancing organizational effectiveness. And you'll see here, the plan is guided by 9 stewardship principles. And these have been really important in thinking about how we do our work moving forward. And it's not necessarily that these are required to be adopted by everyone across the industry. These are really meant for us and to help guide those in the industry if this is important to them. So you'll see empowering the industry through collaboration education, unified voice, elevating the experience. But to the discussion that we're having today, it's really educating through impactful storytelling, thinking about capturing the multifaceted historical and cultural identity, and then preserving and celebrating the authentic character, holding and showcasing Maine's local makers, artists, farmers, fishermen, and other small businesses, safeguarding natural assets. So many of those things are so important to our work. And then very quickly, we also at the Office of Outdoor Recreation, in collaboration with industry and Maine Outdoor Brands and the University of Maine system, are in the process of developing a 10-year outdoor recreation economy roadmap. And thanks to Fourth Economy, we are almost at the point of releasing the roadmap. We're very, very close in the process. And you'll see at the next slide work that is kind of part of this process in itself. And these were more goals of the roadmap process. Really, the idea of the roadmap was to guide growing and diversifying $3.3 billion outdoor recreation economy, looking at areas for diversification. And really the goal of the roadmap was not the roadmap itself, but the development of a resilient, sustainable, and thriving outdoor economy offers good paying jobs and unmatched quality of life. So lots to unpack there, and really looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful. Thank you. Pass it over to George.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So I'm George Ivy with the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation based in Asheville, North Carolina. The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation does a lot of stuff, but I'm just going to focus on the Blue Ridge Music Center today because that's very relevant to the topic we have. So we do the programming and more and more of the operations at the Blue Ridge Music Center, which was established about 25 years ago at mile marker 213 on the Blue Ridge Parkway, very close to the Virginia-North Carolina line near the town of Galax, Virginia. And it has a mission of preserving, interpreting, and presenting the evolving musical traditions of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And a lot of people just assume that just means bluegrass, but it's a little more subtle and complex than that. It is really American roots music and takes on bluegrass, folk, old time, Americana, country blues, and gospel. So pretty rich range of music there. There's a visitor center and museum on site. The museum is both a USA Today top 10 free museum in the country and a top 10 music museum in the country, and the only place that's on both lists. So we're very proud of that. During the season, which is roughly April through October, we offer midday mountain music featuring a lot of local talent, local musicians and bands. And then on summer Saturday evenings, we have an outdoor amphitheater that can seat probably up to about 3,000 people, but it's usually in about the 500 to 1,500 range. Those are the bigger acts that will be there, like Steep Canyon Rangers, Amethyst Kia, some other folks. We also do off-site concerts. So when we talk about the Blue Ridge Music Center, it's sometimes a much bigger footprint than that. We do milepost music on Sunday afternoons at various places along the Blue Ridge Parkway, and then collaborate with other organizations like Yadkin Arts and Yadkin County, North Carolina on a concert series each January. And then we also do some virtual programming, some really nice stuff that if you have a chance, check out our YouTube channel for the Blue Ridge Music Center. A lot of great interviews with people in the music industry in various places. So today we're going to focus on the strategic plan we did in partnership with Fourth Economy. We secured a grant from the National Park Foundation to do this work, and with a title like Strong Parks, Strong Communities, it was a perfect fit. And we had a strategic plan from 2015. It had run its course. It was time to do a new one. We contracted with Fourth Economy, who did a lot of work, data analysis, community engagement, peer institution reviews, sort of case studies. We did a survey of about 1,000 concert goers. Fourth Economy staff, especially Eve, led the build sessions, and then finally created a strategic plan. And it's a very long plan, and got to summarize it in about 1 minute. So we basically had 4 goals for the plan. You can go to the next slide. And that was to look at sustainable financial growth and stability, expanding our programming and expanding our reach and impact, especially to diversify. Like everything on the Parkway, we trend toward old white people or older white people. And we want to really serve the full spectrum of visitors and residents in the area. And economic development is a key part of that as well, with the local communities. Those communities are very closely tied to the Parkway and vice versa. So we want to make sure we're taking care of them too. The plan had 5 themes and lots of different strategies, but I'll just summarize that we want to enhance the programming to engage larger and more diverse audiences. Improve amenities like a shuttle service, because you have to drive up windy roads to get to our place, and not everyone wants to do that, especially coming back at night after a concert. Food and beverage options, including alcohol sales, which hadn't really been done before. Improving our marketing to engage new audiences. We've trended a little traditional in our media and need to change that. We also want to take on more of a role as a leader in this space. There are a lot of actors in this music genre, and but we still see an opportunity for us to be a leader and a convener. And last but not least, we just want to make sure that we have our staffing, our training, everything else optimized so that we are making the most of this and focused on what's important and not on the things that aren't important. So look forward to the discussions, and I'll leave it there for now.
Wonderful. Thanks, George. And last but not least, I'll turn it over to Priya.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you all. I have had the opportunity to work with Fourth Economy as part of a comprehensive arts and culture planning process that we have done in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. That took about 18 months from start until City Council approval, which was last November. And now that plan is being implemented. Excited to be able to talk a bit about that work and what we're seeing here in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about me and kind of where I'm coming from in the context of the work that we did. So currently, I am founder of a new social venture called Road Openers. We help people and ideas achieve their full potential by connecting them with collaborators, resources, and creative energy. And until the end of September, I served as the inaugural Arts and Culture Officer for the City of Charlotte and oversaw a public-private partnership called the Infusion Fund, which was a collaboration among the City of Charlotte and the private sector through the Foundation for the Carolinas. This was a 3-year fund to stabilize the arts and culture sector in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. And through that partnership, we had 2 main mandates: stabilize the sector, as well as develop this long-term arts and culture plan on how to sustain and grow arts and culture locally. And so we have done those 2 things. We distributed $36 million, so $12 million a year for 3 years. And then we developed this plan. Next slide, please. And so here you can see that the vision of the plan is a community where all people value, support, and thrive through arts, culture, and creativity. I like gardens. In my past life as a consultant and funder, have worked with many gardens, and you'll see some garden imagery here as a result. The plan was a very widely community engaged process. So we had over 3,400 people participate in shaping the plan. A steering committee of 40 people guided it from across the county. And we also had 70 leaders from across various sectors, not just arts and culture, write the plan together on 8 task forces. Next slide, please. Among the things that we were tasked with doing were to approach it with an economic development lens. And so that is why we were able to work with Fourth Economy on that portion of the work as part of a larger team led by the planning group, Lord Cultural Resources. And then a key mandate was to recommend a new governance structure. And this is just something that illustrates a innovative, as far as we can tell from our research and experience around the country, a collaborative consortium model for governance, long-term governance of arts and culture that allows for public participation, arts and culture sector participation, and private sector participation. Next slide. And just, as to give you a sense of kind of how I envisioned, or the picture that I had of arts and culture in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County when I first started funding here, which was before I took the role with the city and moved to Charlotte. Prior to that, I was with the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which funds in Charlotte and other cities around the country. And really found an amazing arts and culture scene, artists and organizations of all types and sizes, but not well resourced compared to the amount and the range of arts and culture happening here. And so the image that I had was of flowers growing up through concrete. And the goal, especially with this short amount of time that we had, 3 years in this temporary fund, was what could we do to put more resources, cultivate this with water and nutrients? What more could we do? And, for me, how can we break up some of that concrete by removing barriers? So next slide, please. What I think that we have been able to do, many of us feel that we were able to do, is the image you see on the left, really our strategy for economic development through the planning process, as well as through our grants and other support activities, such as wraparound support for our grantees, and grant writing, coaching, things like that we were able to add that were not done here before. We have put some support structures up. We have been able to do some things in the short term, but long term, what we're really looking to do is the image on the right, where a whole range of diverse, artists, groups, nonprofits, for-profits are all able to flourish. And through their flourishing, our residents and visitors are able to flourish as well. Thanks.
Okay, great. I love that closing statement on flourishing and thriving. So maybe those are some of the themes that we can explore in this next section. So we have about 20 minutes or so for some prepared questions that I will ask of each of our panelists. And for those of you that are tuning in, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A function of Zoom there. We did ask a few questions at registration, and we've taken note of some of those and have tried to integrate those into our Q&A portion. But feel free, as panelists are speaking, to ask your questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can in the last 15 minutes or so of the webinar. So just to kick us off, I think one kind of core question for each of you, given the topic of today's webinar, is around value. And so you each kind of talked about the economic value and economic development as a lens for looking at arts and culture and outdoor assets, which is the topic today. But how else do you view the value of arts and culture and outdoor recreation or placemaking in your community? What impacts or benefits do these assets and amenities have on the people in your region? And more to the point, one of the audience questions that we got in advance was, how do you put a price tag on this stuff? Are there other ways of measuring quality of life and value to a community. So whoever would like to kick us off, feel free to answer our opening question.
I'll give it a shot. I would just say in terms of music, with the Blue Ridge Music Center, we purposefully talk about the living tradition of American roots music. It's not history. It's not just bluegrass. It's very complex. It's music that is taught and learned and adapted and performed today on back porches and at different gatherings. There's music venues all along what's called the Crooked Road in Virginia and the Blue Ridge Music Trails in North Carolina that really help showcase the music and attract visitors and tourism dollars. And I think it's also important that by marketing together, we're also encouraging overnight stays. You can't just kind of come and go. And that really helps monetize some of that talent as well. But it's definitely part of the living fabric of this area. So it's regardless of the tourism dollars, it's just part of the culture.
Right. Go ahead, Priya.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Carol Ann. Well, I was just going to share that, coming into our arts and culture planning process, there were a couple of things that were top of mind for folks in Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. About 10 years ago, there was a study, which we refer in shorthand to as the Chetty study, which was a study of cities around the U.S. and how they were doing on economic mobility. And Charlotte, and I learned this before I moved here, but when I first started kind of working here, everyone was talking about the Chetty study and how Charlotte had placed an embarrassing 50 out of 50 on that study of, people's ability to improve their economic mobility or to improve their, economic sort of station. So there have been various efforts, public and private, to address that. And in an updated version this past year, I think we're now 38, so maybe that's a little bit of improvement, but that was certainly on people's minds. And or has been on people's minds. And then the other thing is that we certainly noticed as we undertook this, over a year long community-wide discussion of arts and culture. And Nicole, I know you were here for these conversations as well. And there has been a lot of focus on the economic development piece as tourism focused, tourism based. And so something we also were hearing and really wanted to emphasize is that, yes, tourism is important, but it's not just tourism. It's about the people who are here. And I think that's where the economic development piece, that local focus and the focus on residents and on our workforce, for us, the connecting piece. And of course, Nicole, please feel free to jump in and share your perspective on this from having worked on the project too. The connection was sort of workforce development and really finding ways to enable our local organizations and arts workers to have sustainable careers. What are the things that we can do to assist them with that? And so it's not that we don't care about tourism, but it's thinking about how to, that's why I kind of have that language on that last slide, grow our own, which I borrowed from Austin, Texas. Another thing so we talked about that, but also, of course, we also talked about all of the other important reasons to have, healthy arts and culture sectors, such as, self-expression, fostering understanding among people, especially across divides, especially nowadays, especially now. And also Charlotte is a city where, just like in many other places, there are a lot of changing dynamics and changing demographics. We're one of the fastest cities, growing cities in the US. I think we've gone from 16th to 14th just in the 3 years that I have been here, and in terms of size. As Fourth Economy found, we were amongst our peer cities that we studied the second fastest growing in terms of the second fastest rate of economic growth, second behind Austin. And we have a lot of transplants. And so there are questions of, identity. How does someone who's new to the place find our place in this new city? But also, how do people who've been here for a long time retain their culture and identity as a lot of these changes are happening extremely rapidly? So quantifying those things is a little bit more challenging, but these were the themes that we discussed and that show up woven throughout the Arts and Culture Plan.
That's great. And I think maybe, Carolyn, I see you unmuting. I think ties in really nicely with what you see in Maine in terms of the people that make up the community and what it means to feel belonging and feel included in that space.
Right. And I was going to say that's a perfect segue, Nicole, because to your question and to this discussion, Fourth Economy had helped really shape how the process would go right from the beginning on the roadmap, and with some really interesting ways for us to engage a broader community like the plan ambassadors. But I think about the guiding principles that we set out right from the beginning, which were around resiliency, sustainability, inclusivity, and innovation, and thinking about Maine's outdoor recreation heritage and really moving beyond where it had been, which was a mix of product manufacturing over the years, but more focused on guiding folks through the outdoors and really sort of more of that visitor experience side. So as we think about that, and then move to where we've landed at this point, ultimately on the goals of the roadmap, really looking at elevating Maine's outdoor recreation industry as a critical and recognized pillar of the state's economy, because this notion of measuring the outdoor recreation economy is still somewhat fresh. I mean, even the Bureau of Economic Analysis has only been measuring this as a portion of GDP for the last 10 to 12 years. So having that definition of who the industry is and the collective sort of folks that contribute to that outdoor recreation economy was really important. Increasing and sustainably managing outdoor participation for residents and visitors, thinking about that and what that means for the resources themselves. Establish outdoor recreation as a tool for building vibrant, economically diverse and resilient communities. Again, to Priya's comment, less about necessarily the visitor side of it, but how do we use outdoor recreation to attract talent, retain talent, diversify our business base? Because not only can a focus on it help bring in those in the industry who are entrepreneurial, but it can also attract businesses from a variety of industry sectors, just because the assets have investment in them, and that's all part of the community mix. And then really establishing Maine as a state for recreation businesses and career opportunities. So looking at that all together, measuring all of that, yes, there are the formal economic sort of ROI components to that, but I think some of it, we'll be continuing at looking at resident surveys on their quality of life and quality, how they feel their communities have continued to evolve. Business surveys, was outdoor recreation a key factor in your decision either to move here, or has it helped attract talent? So thinking about some of those other ways to do that.
Great. And sort of building from that, one of our other core questions was, how has or how could investments in arts and culture or outdoor assets advance some of those broader economic development goals? I heard, a couple of you talk about talent and workforce in particular. I'm also curious about entrepreneurs and small businesses. And, Priya, I know that was a big focus of our work in Charlotte, and just knowing the type of talent that comes through the Music Center. What resources are you all seeing as valuable to support creative businesses, entrepreneurs, really bolster that? Because entrepreneurs are workers too, right? So that's part of that broader workforce and workforce development. How have you seen that working in your communities?
I could take a first shot, and then George, if you want to weigh in. Yes, Nicole, absolutely right. In Charlotte, I think we had from day one, I mean, gosh, we were doing this even before we started the arts and culture planning process, really from the start of the Infusion Fund with our newly assembled Arts and Culture Advisory Board. There had been there's been a kind of a focus on the nonprofit sector in the arts and culture community here. And so we constantly, excuse me, worked to broaden people's perspective of what is part of the arts and culture ecosystem, and that includes for-profit creative enterprises, individual artists and practitioners, and then, of course, funders and venues and, arts education providers and all kinds of different partners. And so really kind of expanding and I guess providing a more complex view of what goes into an arts and culture ecosystem and who the players are, so that then we can really drill down into what are the different kinds of dynamics we need to look at. And so some of the things that show up in the arts and culture plan that we have also been, that we worked to do through the Infusion Fund, and I think will continue to make their way through, are things like training folks in expertise or providing them complementary expertise, such as with our Opportunity Fund grant mechanism that we created. We then started to add other types of things, like we paid grant writers to coach the applicants so that they would have stronger applications. And then in our last round, we also partnered with UNC Charlotte research, a measurement evaluation team there, to provide measurement and evaluation coaching and guidance and even human support through their students who are supervised by faculty, because a lot of times folks aren't thinking about that. And that piece is, of course, so important to understanding how you're doing on your goals, of course, but also then telling that story so that helps you to market it to participants or seek funding, et cetera. So there are those things. We also have really sought to expand the conversation from just grants, although grants are very important, to what are other kinds of things that are important. So I'm pleased to say one of the very first action in Priority 1, Strategy 1 of the plan has begun to come to fruition. It's about sustained public funding in addition to ongoing private funding. And fortunately, for this current fiscal year in June, both the city and the county dramatically increased their commitment to arts and culture funding and approved a combined $21 million, which is far more than we've ever had in Charlotte and Mecklenburg before, and is pretty healthy for around the country. So grateful for that, hoping it continues year over year. But providing that base of support that then we also need to complement with the skills to, have not just seek funding, but, it's more than that. We have a piece in there that has to do with professional development and skills building for individual practitioners. And then we also have, and that's not just artists, but also arts administrators. We also have a piece in the plan that has to do with helping arts and cultural individuals or entities find the right business model, because a lot of folks will think that they need to go straight into, say, a 501c3 model. Well, maybe that's not the best model and the most sustainable model for what you're trying to do. So those are the types of conversations and types of support that we are seeking as a community to provide. in order to, achieve the kinds of economic development benefit and just, in general, the healthy, thriving community that we want to have.
I would just follow up on that somewhat similar remarks that I think sometimes you have a great artist or a great chef, or it could also be just a great farmer. They know how to do their particular craft really well, but they don't necessarily have writing skills or strong business planning skills or marketing skills. They may be very, very shy and just not good about putting themselves out there and telling the world how great they are. So I think a big part of that is just basic economic development, skill building. In Western North Carolina, I'll just give a shout out to Mountain BizWorks, which is just mountainbizworks.org, I think. They have a whole program now to support the outdoor recreation industry. Not just talking about trails, but who's making the boots, who's making the hiking poles, who's selling the hammocks. That whole industry is really flourishing here, I think, in part because of what Mountain BizWorks has been doing. But they teach people those, those basic business skills so that those crafters, arts and crafts people can make a living off what they're doing. And I think just having that sort of workforce development skills can help those people take their great products and really and monetize it and really succeed.
I would say quickly building on that and shout out to Noah and team at Made by Mountains. Love those guys. But we, in Maine, I think partially because of the roadmap process, but even just prior was really building the partnership. So having Maine Outdoor Brands, which is our outdoor business alliance, in Maine as sort of the lead organizing entity that works with entrepreneurs and thinking about business planning and how to connect to resources. And we, as the Office of Outdoor Recreation at the state agency inside Economic and Community Development, partner with them on helping build out that ecosystem. And because of the roadmap process, that sort of broader collaborative group has grown to include the university, which has R&D capabilities and also has now added Maine Technology Institute, which provides grants to innovative tech companies, which quite honestly includes a lot of folks creating products in the outdoor industry. And then additionally working with the Maine Marine Trades Association. So as we continue to grow that broader partnership, a lot of that resourcing and business support, particularly in the entrepreneurial space, that just deepens, and the ability to find the resources and connect with those that are closest to what you're doing has been a really powerful part of building out the core team and the steering committee for the roadmap itself.
Excellent. And I think that really segues nicely into this next question, which I think will be our last prepared question, and then we can kind of turn to some of the Q&A that came in just now and through the registration process. But each of you kind of touched on this in your opening remarks, the amount of cross-sector involvement, engagement, each of you incorporated some pretty significant community engagement into that planning process. And I wonder if each of you could kind of touch on, why did you do that? What are some of the benefits that you saw? Why is it important to cast a wide net and be really inclusive in that engagement? And then sort of a sub question, if you want to answer it from one of the registrants, was, and how do you find a lead organization to sort of coordinate that effort and lead that engagement and make sure you're being inclusive and reaching the right audiences? So I'll open that up. Whoever would like to jump in first.
I can jump in quickly. I mean, again, your team, the Fourth Economy team, was instrumental in working with our core team and steering committee on really expanding our reach. And I think the most important part for us is we didn't and don't want the roadmap to be seen as a state government plan and or a trade association plan, that it really, the intent was it to be an industry and community-led plan. And I think having that broad reach right from the beginning enabled early ownership of some of this. So we're hoping that as we move into implementation, that folks will have been engaged at the point already that they feel even readier, if that is such a term, to take on some action and have some ownership. To the question of how do you find the lead organization, we're still in hopes of having more of a kind of coalition to lead this versus having a lead organization, or ultimately that as we get into the strategies and action steps, that it'll be more individually led depending upon areas of focus. So there may be a strategy that has a lead organization versus the plan having a lead organization. So we're working through that a little bit still, but again, Fourth Economy's guidance in that has been incredibly helpful, particularly as we looked at plan ambassadors, which really reached out to underserved and marginalized communities that had not been part of the outdoors or inside the outdoor recreation industry more formally, and had seen barriers to the work that was going on. So having those voices at the table was incredibly important and really leveraged some insights we would have not had otherwise as we developed the process.
And just a little more insight on plan ambassadors. This was a strategy that we deployed in Maine to recruit grassroots, under-resourced organizations, nonprofits, those that are working within the community, and specifically with communities that we felt like typically get left out of planning processes, that we really wanted to include those that are working with Indigenous populations, with the LGBTQ communities, and really exposing, BIPOC youth to the outdoors. So that was a really key strategy and a really powerful strategy to making sure that that was an inclusive process.
I'll add a few thoughts that, again, I'll also credit Fourth Economy. When we were doing our strategic planning effort, Eve really pushed for us to create a advisory committee made up of people from the arts sector, tourism sectors, and others, and very valuable, helped us ground truth some things that we were seeing, and to see if other people were seeing the same things, or if they were seeing some different things that we weren't seeing. And I think it works both ways. And so got a lot of great knowledge out of that, great relationships. And two of those people on that advisory committee, just for the Blue Ridge Music Center, are now on our advisory committee for the whole foundation. So it's really led to some great long-term relationships. And generally, we feel that everyone kind of works too much in their silos. So anytime we can bring tourism and economic development people and arts people, or Virginia people, North Carolina people together and break down those silos and those barriers, we usually see a lot of value in that, because I think, like some people may be more focused on tourism and economics, we're more focused on the talent, or someone might be more focused on outdoor recreation, but they can all complement each other, and it's helpful to improve our understanding of each other, and that's where we learn to collaborate. And I'd say at the same time, though, despite our need to learn a lot more in terms of finding a leader, we kind of want to be that leader. We have this great museum, we have this great location on 500 acres that also has trails. We think we have a lot to offer, and we're also at that crossroads between the Crooked Road in Virginia and the Blue Ridge Music Trails in North Carolina. Two great organizations, but they serve different geographies, but we're right in the middle of that. So, how can we help bring everyone together so that not only we are learning from other people, but Virginians are learning from North Carolinians, and vice versa. So, anyone, if you don't see a leader around, jump in and claim your stake.
And I'll just say that, for our process, the role of Arts and Culture Officer and the Arts and Culture Advisory Board that I worked with in that role, these were created to lead this process, to develop this arts and culture plan, as well as to distribute the funding. And for us, frankly, the Infusion Fund was created in a context of tension, and it was kind of a controversial thing that the Charlotte City Council did to kind of create this thing, and it also had been many years. 2014 was the last comprehensive plan that had taken place, and so there are various kind of forces that were the backdrop for us beginning this arts and culture plan, and actually that meant, and there also was a lot of distrust of various players and institutions. So we knew that we needed to be really inclusive and highly community engaged and extra transparent in order to really earn the trust of the community as we went through developing this plan. And fortunately, my background is as a planner and community engagement, and I was always, kind of trained and taught that, the participants in a planning process ought to, as much as possible, reflect the people who are being served. And so the holy grail, if you will, always is try to have a steering group or whoever and the public participation. We're aiming to get to something that resembles the community and communities that are being served. So as you know, Nicole, that's what we were aiming to do as we worked together with the Lord Cultural Resources team. And that's why we did some things too that just hadn't been done before, at least not in terms of the city of Charlotte. And I'm not sure if they'd been done on the county level either. For example, we had for our consultant teams, we interviewed the finalist teams in a public meeting. And I don't know about you guys, but the city of Charlotte had never done that before. And we asked procurement, do you guys do that? Does that ever happen? And they said, well, we don't know if it's having happened, but that doesn't mean we can't do it. And we said, okay, let's do it. And so that was, something we started with to really demonstrate how committed we were to transparency. And so also that's why, whereas I think that there were members of city council as well as members of our advisory board who thought that the steering committee would be the 18-member advisory board, just coming from a background where working on other cultural plans in other cities like Dallas and others, we had a much broader and larger group steering it, and with many different disciplines represented. And so, I frankly just, insisted that needed to happen. And luckily there were others who agreed that also needed to happen. And so that's why we had a steering group of 40 people from arts and culture, higher education, social service, corporate sector, public health, various, walks of life. And then also when it came time to write the plan, we kind of doubled down on it even further, which was that we recruited more people to participate in writing the plan together. So we added 30 people, and that's how we had 70 people writing the plan together on 8 task forces. So it was sort of like each step that we made, we just asked ourselves, are there more voices who need to be part of this? And often the answer was yes. So we took the steps necessary to make that happen.
Awesome. Great. I'm going to transition to one of the audience Q&A questions. Jed Olson asked, can you give an example of overcoming a hurdle as you move from thought to action, seeing any specific activity or outcome come out of a planning process, and maybe tying it to one of the other questions that we had, which is, what was the impact? What did you see as a result of that? So George, maybe I can pass it to you first, because I know you have that question in particular.
This might not be exactly what Jed was hoping for, but a big question or big idea came up in our strategic planning about alcohol sales. The margin on alcohol sales is tremendous. So if you want to increase your financial revenues and stability, it's a great thing to look at. Then there is a lot of sort of counter opinion to that. About if that made the facility no longer family friendly. And I'll just say, as someone from Asheville and someone with two kids, you got to have beer to have it be family friendly. And I'd also say, as a parent, alcohol sales don't determine for me if something's family friendly. What determines that is whether there's something for kids to do. And so it's interesting how these perceptions that alcohol equaled was not equal to family. A lot of different opinions, and I can't say that we all are on the same page yet. That's resulted in a very slow rollout of the alcohol sales at the Blue Ridge Music Center. It's also on Park Service land, so that's another complication. So we've pursued it as sort of like you kind of have to ante up even to get into the space to buy alcohol. And so we're moving slowly and seeing that the world has not ended. And but at the same time, we're not getting the revenue that we could from just a more standard process. It's being a little more hit and miss, just to be sensitive to some of those concerns. Sort of a crawl, walk, run approach, if you will. So it's definitely been a bit of a hurdle, but I think it's going in the right direction towards responsible alcohol sales and increased revenue.
I can jump in, Nicole, quickly because of the roadmap and the 4 primary goals and the interconnectivity between natural resource management and health and outdoor recreation as a whole. That I think for us, there's been a lot of back and forth on kind of how deeply the roadmap gets into natural resource management, where there's so many people who are doing such incredible work in that space already, because the roadmap was really originally sort of thought of more in the terms of broader economic development and business development and growth. So it's been a back and forth, and we've had, fortunately, the players we need to at the table to have that discussion as to how detailed and how deeply, say, goal 2 gets into resource management versus just an understanding of how critical it is for us to have that healthy resource that is the outdoors, whether it's land and water, be there, for the long term. So that's been a bit of a back and forth as we kind of narrow in on that goal and the strategies and the action steps.
I know we're running short on time, so I want to highlight one of the other questions that came through the Q&A. Sarah asked about, how has the creative sector and outdoor recreation sector been responding to Hurricane Helene's devastation? And I know someone else asked a question in the pre-registration around, how do we think about adaptation to the impacts of climate change? So I want to turn it over to you to handle that. And obviously, Priya and Carol Ann, if you have questions as well, feel free to jump in. And maybe while we're chatting, if we could our slide with our resources, if folks are interested in donating, we wanted to put together a couple of resources to support hurricane relief efforts, given where some of our panelists are located. So, George, could I turn it over to you?
Sure. I appreciate the question. So many people have been supportive of Western North Carolina in particular already. Not that we're the only place devastated. Erwin, Tennessee, some places in Virginia as well. In terms of like adapting to climate change and things like that, the River Arts District in Asheville is in a floodplain. It was absolutely devastated by the flooding and related damage. It is an outdoor recreation mecca, lots of trails in there along the river, and a huge arts community that's moved into what used to be just a bunch of sort of industrial space back when I was growing up. That area flooded in 1977. It flooded this time the worst ever. And I believe there's been a flood or two in between. We don't know what Asheville's going to do and what people are going to do there. Will the Greenway move? Will they re-engineer something? Will the studios go right back to the floodplain? So it's a work in progress, I think, and everyone's really just been focused initially on restoring basic needs. We still don't have clean drinking water in Asheville. I guess the tourism folks don't want me to say that, but it's true. And then it's a matter of doing damage assessments and figuring out the path to recovery. But a lot of artists lost their works. Whole studios were just underwater. Things were lost. So whether you're a studio manager or an artist, whether you live in Asheville or nearby, you're probably impacted financially by the storm, if not in other ways. So very grateful for everyone's attention and support for the arts community in this area. They definitely need it.
Okay, great. Thanks, George, and happy to hear that some relief has happened and obviously an ongoing process. So if folks are inclined or want to support those efforts, we just shared the links to some of these resources in the chat as well. We're almost out of time, so I wanted to thank all of our panelists, and I know there was a ton of questions in the Q&A and through registration that we didn't get to. I know there's a whole segment of questions that we got around funding and how do you resource this and how do you go after grants and which grants are out there. So I'm sure we could do a whole nother webinar just on that topic. And Kamal, we saw your question in there. It sounds like another, webinar topic in and of itself around sort of, conflict needs in communities. So we want to keep the conversation going. After we depart today, we will share our webinar recording out with everybody so that you have our panelists' contact information in case you want to reach out and continue to ask questions. We'll also send some links to resources, including the plans and strategies that the panelists mentioned. And, please reach out if you have questions, if you have strategies that you're thinking about in your community. This was really meant to spur ideas, spur inspiration, and do peer learning. So I'm sure we could learn from each and every one of you as well. So with that, I just want to thank each of our panelists. Thanks, Carol Ann. Hope you feel better. Thank you, Priya. Thank you, George.
Thank you.
Thanks to all the attendees, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.